Welcome. As if having a shock elimination from Croatia in the quarterfinals of the World Cup was not bad enough for Brazil, there's also political instability. You might have seen the scenes some days ago where fans of the previous president, Jair Bolsonaro, were attacking the Congress. So we're going to discuss this today, not only with Mark, who's here with us, but also with Mateus Pazzini. So Mateus is the guy who's running Objetivismo Brazil. Go and check it out. It is the main objectivist organization in Brazil, and he will give us his perception on what is happening. Before we start with Mateus and Mark, let me give a quick recap of what has happened in Brazil in the last 2 months so that our audience can follow. So in October, we had the presidential elections, 2 rounds. The first round, Lula, the former president in the early 2000s, still I think 2012, who then spent some time in prison allegedly for political corruption. Then he was freed again. So Lula was against Bolsonaro. So it was a left versus right, to think about it, political conflict. So Lula won the first round, but not with enough percentage so as to give him the presidency. So in the first round, you have to get above 50%. So Lula and Bolsonaro, only the two of them, went to the second round. And Bolsonaro, Jair Bolsonaro, the right-wing president who was president in these elections, before the second round, and actually before even the first round, he was claiming that there will be election fraud. The same thing that Trump did. He said, if I lose these elections, there's something which looks suspicious. And the question, the challenge was about whether the electronic voting system was reliable. Hold this for a second. We're going to get back to that. We've got the second round, and Lula, the left-winger, wins by the smallest margin that the president has ever won, something like 50.9%. To put it in numbers, Lula won 2 million more votes than Bolsonaro. Now, 2 million might sound a lot, but we're talking about a country of 214 million people. So it was a very, 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 very small margin. The fans of Bolsonaro immediately started talking about election fraud. Bolsonaro himself didn't directly say that there was an election fraud, but in the first hours, he was quiet. Then he said, I will not challenge the transition of power, but he didn't say that he accepts the result as legitimate results. But in the next weeks, so we are now, let's say, somewhere in the middle of November, Bolsonaro makes an official appeal to the highest electoral court, saying that the electronic vote system, so those who voted via a particular electronic system, these votes should not count. And if these votes would not count, Bolsonaro would be the president. The election office, the election court declined Bolsonaro's claim. Since then, Bolsonaro went to the United States. His son is also there. Allegedly, he met with Trump. Allegedly, he met with Steve Bannon. And the question was, how can we challenge this election? So throughout this time, fans of Bolsonaro keep protesting and claiming that the election was stolen. And actually, some of them are inviting the army to intervene and inviting the army to do something. And this culminated some days ago in January 8th, when they occupied the building of the Congress in Brasilia. The capital of Brazil is not Rio, as most of us thought. It's actually Brasilia. So here's where we are today. Bolsonaro is in the States, but his fans still claim that this election was stolen. So Mateus, is this what has been happening? And what's your first take on the last 2 months of political instability in Brazil?
Well, thanks for the invitation again to be here with you. It's a pleasure to be discussing Brazil through an objectivist lens. So if the election was stolen, I'm not a software engineer. I mean, there are many analyses made, not just in Brazil, but also in the States, that are available on YouTube and stuff like that. So there are some suspicious numbers. There are cities, for example, where Lula got, for example, 300 votes against 1 or against 0 votes from Bolsonaro. Cities that where Bolsonaro went and had many people cheering for him. I mean, he went to the cities personally. So, I mean, we can discuss that, and there might be some kind of cheating involved. But at the end of the day, we cannot make such a declaration. So technically the problem was related to the software from 2016 backward. So there are several kind of lots from 2010, 2012, 2016, 2020. The 2020 machines technically didn't have any problem, which were updated with the 2020 software version. So that was the claim made. And but really the point is that Lula got elected. He's now in power, and the things that happened last Sunday were really terrible for any person trying to defend this new hard right coming from Bolsonaro, and of course gave Lula some leeway time to try to use the 100 first days, right? The first 100 days, every government has to try to implement something. So our Congress gets back on February 1st, and there is a majority pro-Bolsonaro, technically, because you know that politicians change their minds quite easily. So we expect to have an uphill battle for the approval of any of Lula's ideas and projects.
So let's make this clear to people. So in Brazil, you have the president, and the people vote for the president, but they also vote for the two legislative bodies, the equivalent in some ways of the Congress and the Senate. And in the Congress, which is the two bodies together, Bolsonaro and the right wing, to put it this way, has the majority. So Brazil has a left-wing president, but he hasn't got a free reign in the parliament. Now, Mark, it looks like that the new narrative is that whenever there are some elections, people already have the suspicion in advance that if they lose, it will be up to some electoral fraud. And the obvious question here is just Bolsonaro copying Trump? Because there are many similar things. The one similar is that before the election, he claimed that if I lose, keep in mind there might be fraud. There has also been the claim that social media and, quote, big tech has been in a fight against Bolsonaro already from March 2020, when they took down his video where he was taking hydrochloroquine when he had his COVID. So and after the election, he went to the official appealing, let's say, court, and then his fans took the situation in their own hands. So is this it looks like there's a copycat from the US, and this looks like to be the playbook of the right these days.
It does. And I think his visit with Trump sort of, bears witness to that. My concern is that this is going to be the template from now on, right? Anytime there's a dissatisfied party in an election, they can claim election fraud, they can claim malfunctioning equipment, and try to get those results overturned by force. Now, we've I think conditioned people over the last couple of years. At the beginning of the COVID pandemic, when we started experiencing riots across the United States here, that it's okay to get what you want through force. So now people think that, that's just a political statement. Violence is just another means of putting your political point of view out there and trying to actually win the public over through violence. So my concern is this is habitual now. Now we're going to start seeing this from here on in.
And the point is, there needs to be a way to make sure that even the most suspicious person, or at least people who are willing to think, that they are all 100% sure that the elections are transparent. Because we hear from Mateusz, and I've heard from other people that, yeah, there is a possibility that something was wrong with the system. So that's not very reassuring, particularly in very polarized times. And it's very weird that in country, for example, like Greece, where you had political polarization forever, where you've had elections where a lot of things were in stakes, it was almost never an issue that people thought that there was a electional fraud or interference. Because what happens is in every school, because the elections take place at school, over these big boxes where you have the votes, there are representatives from every party, and literally they measure every vote. So now that we've transitioned to more advanced or alternative forms of voting, there needs to be a way where it's totally clear to people that everything is okay. So Mateusz,
Yeah,
so what's
the idea,
what's
just
yeah,
just to complement the last thing you said, there was a project trying to make sure that you were able to take like a printed copy
yeah,
of your vote.
and that worked
take home.
apparently. The printed copy worked.
Yes, except, I mean, for this election, we didn't have this. So
okay.
we could not know. For that's why people try to use this narrative, because I was not able to really verify if my voted was counted as I did it. So people began to use this argument to try to turn things
so
around.
it's the equivalent of, let's say you make an online purchase, but you don't get a verification email. So
exactly.
you don't know, now that I pressed submit, did I vote or did I? Yeah, that's not a good way to.
Yeah, I don't. Maybe, for example, if I went to the Supreme Court where they have all the votes, and then I tell them at what time I went to a specific place because I had my cell phone and I was able. Maybe I am able to check somehow, but that's not functional, right?
Right.
So
yeah. So this is the claim of the people who say that the election was legit. They say that somewhere there's a record of everyone who voted, and that record stands. That record is okay. Another thing that I found interesting in these elections is that one could see the conservatives in the dissident, the countercultural conservatives or the Trumpite conservatives jumping full on this narrative. So Tucker Carlson said two things. The one thing is that the election was rigged. But the other thing he said is that Lula, whom he presented as a criminal, he said Lula is on a trajectory to make Brazil a China-like dictatorship. And also that Lula has good relationship with the Chinese Communist Party. Now, whatever Tucker Carlson says, I take it with many, many pinches of salt. If he tells me today is Thursday, I'm going to check my calendar to see if it's Friday. But
yeah,
is there is there anything on that?
I mean, Lula is a socialist. He's a professional socialist since the 80s. So if you ask me if he wanted to have something like Cuba, China, or something like that, yes, probably yes. The ideas and for example, economic plans he's trying to make sure to approve soon are censorship of the media. He's already doing that together with the Supreme Court. Several politicians got their social media blocked. Now they are going.
What's the justification? What's his excuse for that?
Fake news. Because the Supreme Court is, they say that now they have, Lula actually is trying to create like a ministry of truth. He wants to put into law that you cannot do fake news. But even in the first days of his own government, his own ministries are publishing fake news of one another. They are fighting against each other. So if there was not that Sunday event, probably we would be for the first time in history to have a 2-week government in a deep in a deep internal crisis, because they are fighting against each other. So it's totally crazy. I mean, but it's nice to step back a little for people who don't know our last 20 years. So we have 14 years with Lula, with that idea of spending a lot, no fiscal responsibility. I'm gonna be for the poor. I'm gonna help them. So he had 8 years. He had the advantage of the commodity boom. So Brazil kind of grew, and then came Dilma, and then she had to pay the price.
Dilma Rousseff, who was also from the same political milieu.
So there was this social democrat platform from Lula who didn't work. So from 2014 onwards, until Bolsonaro got elected, then we had like a conservative resurgence with religion in the mix, with politics and stuff like that. So people were tired of the Lula version. They were not getting, like, there's a joke now that Lula would, if he won, he would distribute picanha, which is the best part of the beef from here in Brazil. So Bolsonaro came and said, well, this didn't work. I'm going to join with religion and other conservatives, and I'm going to present a different option. He got elected. There was the pandemic. He decided to, he's a terrible politician in the sense he doesn't know how to deal with people at all. So he has no social skills, soft skills. And then he was able to lose the election because Lula didn't win. Bolsonaro lost. So and that's a hard truth.
Performance in the election was I think one of the worst, if not the worst, of a sitting president. But the point is this. So we know Lula, you're right. We've seen Lula. He was the star, the homeboy of the early 2000 left. He was supposedly this alternative model to neoliberalism. And yet, Mark, somehow the right makes such a fool of itself, where now Lula looks like the serious guy. Like, okay, the choice in Brazil is this leftist who is not a complete nutter, and these nutters who attack the Congress and who before the election told us that if we lose, it's because of fraud. So what to choose from these two evils?
Yeah, you can't really choose. But I mean, the right makes a fool of itself because it has divorced itself from rationality deliberately. And it ceded that to the left, right? The left has the intellectuals and the academics, and the right are in rebellion against academia. And they're in rebellion against some of the more egregious anti-conceptual things that the left is putting out there in the culture. But it winds up becoming a rebellion against reason, qua reason, you know? So, and then they embrace tradition and religion as the alternatives to rationality. So it's really hard to take them seriously about anything.
Yeah, I mean, don't take me wrong. Bolsonaro did a good job in terms of economic freedom. I mean, he had Paulo Guedes, which is known also in the United States as a finance minister. So he had many good things. I had many friends of mine in the Ministry of Economics and Finance. So they did well. But we know that any kind of economic measure can be overthrown the day after a new government take place. So this is not the realm where we can get long-term results. So what the left, what the right had to use after Bolsonaro, to pray for God. I mean, there was nothing more to do, because it's just if you see the pictures, for example, you're gonna see several descriptions of, I mean, God, which is in Portuguese Deus. So you're gonna see in the placards, you're gonna see several references to these things, family, which is família in Portuguese. So it's always the same thing, the fight against abortion, the family, the tradition, the conservative tradition. Many of the well-read conservatives, they go back to the 800s to discuss our historical heritage, the many good politicians, conservative politicians we had in the 1850s, a little bit before our independence. That's fine, and we should understand and know what they did right, no problem, but that doesn't change the reality we are living now. It doesn't touch philosophy. It's just going back and read a book, and that's fine, but it doesn't change anything.
Here's how I would sum up the problem. The conservatives can be sometimes good in economics. As you said, Bolsonaro was one of these people. But they have nothing in terms of a positive vision in the realm of ideas. So what do? They enter the field of the culture wars. And they do it in a way which is absolutely almost comical. They do it in a way where see who they went to meet in the United States, Steve Bannon. Like, is Steve Bannon going to save your campaign, or is Steve Bannon the way to go if you want to? That says it all. So they have this dead end. We cannot only rely on economics. We have no philosophy, no positive philosophy. Therefore, either we're going to throw our own vision of collectivism, or we're going to engage in the culture wars and own the libs. So you saw, for example, Bolsonaro talking a lot about woke. He even, I think, talked about transgender, critical race theory, all these things. So it's copycat from what's happening in the States. But I'll say one thing. I was surprised that many football stars in Brazil supported Bolsonaro. This would be unthinkable in any other country. So Neymar was an obvious example. Rivaldo played in my team in Greece, AK Athens. I've seen Rivaldo play, and actually I've seen him score. So, but that's unimaginable in the UK. You'd never imagine in the UK almost half of the football players of the national team supporting the Tories. So this shows that although in a clumsy way, Bolsonaro has had some success in the so-called culture wars. The point is, is this the way to go? Like, no, by falling so low as to be the Trump of Brazil?
No, as you said, there is this tendency of trying to portray, to project the US situation into our election. But if you consider our left here in Brazil, it is years behind in terms of like intellectual capacity to do damage. It's really raw. There are not many good intellectuals in the left that you could consider to be really influencing the culture right now. So it's just about giving public, for example, in public, when you to become a public employee, so you have to go through a test. So they use affirmative action, this kind of raw policies, and you have some companies trying to get advantage of the public, of the Black and gay community, which is everywhere in the world. But the main argument for Lula right now, I mean, when he got elected, was that he was for love and peace, and he would be the hero of the poor.
This is like you are referring to 15 years old.
Exactly. So Bolsonaro was able to lose an election against this kind of argument. It's not critical race theory, which is a more evolved form of criticism, social criticism. No, he lost against love and peace, which is, I don't even know what they want to, what they want to transmit, I mean, with this kind of concepts.
Okay.
So it's
let me see. Let's go to Mark, and in the meanwhile, I'll see what the audience says.
No, I think the idea isn't to transmit much. I think the idea is to put sort of a stem cell out there and let it mutate into whatever anybody thinks it should be, right? So peace and love means something different to everybody, and that's great. It has the widest appeal possible. You can make it into anything you want. You don't have to get specific about it. I think the left has that market, the bromide market, cornered.
So thank you, Marilyn. Thank you. So free trade says something interesting. He said there should be open sourced systems in the elections. He brings the example of blockchain to eliminate uncertainty about fraud, tampering, etc. Yeah, but try talking to the government about blockchain and open source. They're going to stare at you as if you're talking
Well,
Greek.
but that might have purchase in some states. I mean, we still live in a federalist system in the United States. The states are still supposed to have primary control over the way their elections go, and that could be very sellable to a few states. And if those states use them successfully, it could be a guide for other states to do the same.
Indeed, and
also we didn't discuss that, but our election system is not per district. So, for example, I live in my state, Rio Grande do Sul, which has 400 cities. I am able to vote to a candidate which is like 400 kilometers far away from where I live. So at the end of the day, the candidate I vote for doesn't need to have any relationship to my district. So you don't get real representation at all. At the end of the day, I voted for a person, which of course lives in my state, but it's so far away from me that I'm not able even to have a state level impact. I don't get in touch with that person.
And he's representing a demographic, as you said, that isn't your demographic, right? If we elect an official, they live in San Francisco, that's very different from Los Angeles, which is very different from San Diego, which is very different from Reading.
So that's why people at the end of the day don't care a lot about who they vote for, deputy or senator, because they don't really know the person. I mean, I've never got.
The only time I felt passionate about a local representative was a guy who built a lot of CrossFit open gyms that during the pandemic, they were very, very, very useful. So sometimes people can make a change. So Ashley Shrugged talks about the regulation of quote faking news and says the emperor is naked. Indeed, this is like regulating fake news is literally censorship. This is exactly what censorship is, when the government does it. And in Brazil, as Mateus told us, it was not only social media companies who did this, they were also the authorities who engaged in deciding what is fake news or not, which falls in the category of censorship. Apollo Zeus has a very good question. Why is the main reason that Latin America countries have major swings between extreme left and the right?
There's no clear philosophy in the population. So there's no
clear philosophy in Europe, but they vote boring centrist empty cells.
Yeah, I think there's something to do with the victimhood personality, which is rampant here in Latin America. From the 60s, when you see the economic theories that were adopted here, there is always the center in that Europe that were exploring Latin America and extracting the mineral resources from the 1500s onwards, when there was the colonization here from Portugal and Spain. So the same narrative has more than 500 years old. Is more than 500 years old.
And also
it changes, it mutates, like Mark said.
And there's a very painful history in Latin America of dictatorships of the right. So in Latin America, as in Greece, anti-communism is not related to an ideological view. It's related to torture chambers and military thugs doing coups. So
I get the sense, Nikos and Mateus, you could tell me if I'm wrong. Many of the countries that were colonized by Europe, they placed in certain social and political hierarchies that when they were overthrown were just replaced by the people from the bottom who imitated those same social and political hierarchies. So, they grew up with, the strong man, and then they replaced one strong man with another. Essentially, they didn't have as Matthias said, the philosophical foundation to understand that that's wrong on both sides of the aisle.
Yeah,
it's wrong.
exactly. So that's what we saw in our independence movement. There was no war. If you check history, they just gave some kind of coup, and they took out the person who was in, and then they took over, like Mark said. But they were not prepared. They didn't have any new option going forward. So they just took from there and so on. So we had more than 9 constitutions in less than 100 years. So how can
9 constitutions? Well, that gives Greece a run for its money. And of course, every constitution doesn't protect you from the government. Every constitution is about what the government. So, for example, in the Greek constitution, you have that it's not allowed to have private universities. Here's a constitution which is protecting the government from people. Final 2 super chats. Thank you, Jeff, and many thanks to Walter for your contributions. Now, there is one place where there's no fake news, where there are no riots, and this is going to be the Ayn Rand conference not in Brazil, but in a country equally, if not more beautiful, Greece. So 7th till 11th of April, or 7th till 10th, because you can either take the conference or the package that includes also the excursion. 7th till 10th of April, we have the big conference of the Ayn Rand Institute in Europe, in Athens. We're going to discuss philosophy. We're going to walk where Aristotle walked. Literally, we're going to have great Greek food. Greece in the spring is very beautiful. So I'm sure Daniel will give us the link in the chat, or just Google Ayn Rand Con Europe 2023 Athens. Now, Mateusz, thank you very much for being with us and giving us this update of the crazy things happening in Brazil. Again, it seems to be the order of the day that everyone has their own reality, and whatever any stuff that we see in the US, soon we see anywhere else. Back in the day, we used to say whatever happens in the US, after 15 years, it happens to the rest of the world. Now it literally happens a year later. So many thanks to Mateusz. Many thanks to Mark for your time and for your contribution.
Hey, I just wanted to say real quick, my reality check drops today on environmentalism, so check it out. And also I'm part of a documentary called Capitalism Reimagined. It's right now, it's streaming on YouTube, but you can check it out if you go to my Twitter page. I've retweeted it for anybody who wants to see it. They can watch it.
Yeah, so if you go to YouTube and put Capitalism Reimagined, you see this documentary. Mark is featured in it, but you will see other figures you will know. You'll see Douglas Murray, for example, there, and you'll see Mark looking suave, black on black, as I've tried to persuade Yaron Brook to have this black on black red coat. So check this out and go again on Mark's Twitter and see his latest reality check. So that's all. In 2 hours, actually not in 2 hours, at 8 p.m. UK time, in the other channel of ARC UK with the short clips, there is the Briefly Objective with Harry Binswanger on the rise of anti-Semitism. Gentlemen, thank you very, very much. Long live Brazil, long live Ribo. Yes, what?
One last thing, all the reality checks episodes, they have Portuguese subtitles on Mark YouTube channel. So if you are from Brazil and you don't know English that well, you are able to check it in Portuguese as well.
Thanks to Matthias. Thank you very much, man.
Thanks.
Excellent.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.